Have you ever questioned if God is truly present in your life? Have you ever been tempted to explore atypical faiths? I don't have to tell you that you're not alone, but something I would like to share is one man's experience in a change like that and how it affected him. The old saying, "You don't know what you have until it's gone," rings truer than ever in Bartolo Longo's story, and maybe, just maybe, his story will help you. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we explore the stories of various saints throughout history and learn about what they did and how we came to recognize them as saints today. Today, we're going to explore the life of Saint Bartolo Longo, who was born in a Catholic family, but turned towards Satanism as a young adult, only to find out the truth. Bartolo was born on February 10th, 1841, in Latiano, Italy, or at the time, part of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. When he was young, just 10 years old, his father died. His mother then remarried, and Bartolo's stepfather was a respected lawyer, so the family was financially well off. The family was also very devout. They prayed the rosary together every night, and Bartolo went to a Piarist school until he was 16. And the Piarists is an order dedicated to education. Their full name is Order of Poor Clerics of the Mother of God of the Pious Schools, which is a little bit of a mouthful. As Bartolo grew up, he decided that he wanted to become a lawyer, like his stepfather. But his stepfather actually tried to convince him to be a teacher, which is kind of interesting. I feel like most fathers or stepfathers would like that their kid wants the same type of job as them. But I guess I'll find out when I become a dad someday just how true that sort of stereotypical sentiment is. But after some consistent pressure, which seems characteristic of a lawyer, Bartolo did convince his stepfather to let him become a lawyer. And so he was sent off to the University of Naples to study law. And fun fact, the University of Naples is the oldest public, secular, non-state funded university in the world. And it was founded in 1224. I just think it's a fun little fact. It doesn't really pertain to the story, but it's still cool. Now, to really paint a picture of what shaped Bartolo in this critical time of his life, it is important to understand that in the mid-1800s, the Catholic Church in Italy was being targeted by a nationalistic movement. And that movement eventually led to the Risorgimento, or the unification of Italy. A leader in this movement, General Giuseppe Garibaldi, viewed the papacy as an obstacle to overcome, and his goal was to abolish the position of the Pope altogether. And at the same time, spiritualism and occultism were spreading and growing in popularity all across Europe, which definitely didn't help the church at all. And I imagine many of you know that large movements like this can find strong support from young adults searching for an identity. So, a large section of the student body at the University of Naples partook in demonstrations against the Pope, and they explored these atypical faiths. And while all of this was going on, Bartolo was actually a very successful student, but he was also a very restless student. He was talented in literature and speaking, in fencing, dancing, music, and even played the piano and the flute, as well as directing the school band. But despite all of these activities, Bartolo just felt that it wasn't enough. He was definitely searching for an identity in these little pastimes, but failing to find himself, he turned towards what so many of his classmates were involved in. But always keep in mind that peer pressure isn't always good. During a class taught by a priest who had actually drifted from his faith, Bartolo began to drift too. His days of praying the rosary were at an end. He drifted from piety to apathy, from apathy to disdain, and from disdain to just outright aberration. He could not stand Catholicism. So he joined his classmates' demonstrations opposing the Pope, and he began to practice occultism. As he dove deeper into the occult, he was drawn toward the darkest side of it, Satanism. He continued learning about Satanism and even became a satanic priest. He was deeply involved in the occult and the satanic practices, conducting satanic services and whatever the equivalent, or maybe to be the opposite in this case, of preaching in masses would be. Declaring blasphemy against the faith that he once held so dear, he consigned his soul to a demon. He started to call the church the real evil. He was blinded by empty promises, and he was lost. Those around Bartolo noticed a distinct change in the young man, at least those who weren't involved in these less than ideal practices. Over the course of the next year, after Bartolo became a satanic priest, he was described as a man with a body reduced to skin and bones, 2 possessed eyes, frazzled nerves, a devilish beard, and a stomach ailment doomed to accompany him for the rest of his life. And he even said that he felt an ominous presence by his side, a being that he referred to in his own words as his angel. But this angel could really better be described as something else, a demon. Bartolo became more depressed, he became more nervous, and he was just confused. And the longer he practiced Satanism, the more confused he got. Vincenzo Pepe, one of his professors, Alberto Rodante, a Dominican friar, and Saint Caterina Volpicelli, a sister in the Maids of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, noticed this change, and they tried to help Bartolo. They encouraged him to seek the Virgin Mary for guidance and to regularly pray the Rosary. Seeking any way to drive away his suffering, he caved and he did as they suggested, even though it went against what he believed at the time. And right away, he noticed his pains and sufferings start to disappear. He continued this until one day when he finally renounced his satanic practices, declaring it nothing but a maze of error and falsehood, and any challenges he had were gone. Though he had found salvation and adjusted his life's course, he still felt as though his wrongs were unforgivable, and he wanted desperately to shake this feeling. Eventually, he would get his wish, though he never expected it to arrive in the way that it did. The years went by, and Bartolo continued praying the Rosary and praying to the Virgin Mary. Finally, on October 7th, 1871, he became a Dominican tertiary, and he took the name Rosario in honor of the Rosary. He spent much of his time helping the poor and trying to keep the terminally ill as comfortable as possible. What about his education to be a lawyer, you might ask? He still kept up his practice, and this could arguably be part of what God had in his plan for Bartolo. Bartolo went to Pompeii to help with some legal affairs of his friend, Countess Mariana Farnararo de Frusco. She owned property there, and Bartolo was going to check it out and renew the contracts for the properties. While in Pompeii, he was surprised to see just how the people practiced their religion. On this observation, he wrote, their religion was a mixture of superstition and popular tradition. They would go to a witch, a sorceress, in order to obtain charms. And he talked to some of the locals, and he even asked one if there was only one God, to which that man replied, when I was a child, I remember people telling me there were 3. Now, after so many years, I don't know if one of them is dead or one of them is married. And that's a pretty wild answer. Now, granted, not everybody holds the same religion and beliefs, but you gotta admit that if you ask somebody that question, the answer of, I don't know if he's dead, maybe he's married, when you're referring to a god, you would never expect that. That type of answer and just the lack of faith overall in the city bothered Bartolo. He knew what good could come of finding faith, and the severe lack thereof in Pompeii was just overwhelming for him. It actually drove him down a dark path, reminding him of his past and his involvement in Satanism, and he even said that it caused him to battle suicidal thoughts. But he remembered the words from Mary to St. Dominic that always saved him in times like this. He who propagates my rosary will be saved. He resolved to encourage the people of Pompeii to pray the Rosary in an attempt to lead them back to God and an attempt to save them. With the help of his friend, the Countess, he established a confraternity of the Rosary and began restoring a dilapidated church in 1873. In 1875, Mother Conqueta de l'Itala from the Monastery of the Rosary at Porta Medina gifted a painting to Bartolo. It showed Mary holding baby Jesus with Saints Dominic and Catherine of Siena, but it was in pretty rough shape. Bartolo later admitted that he actually didn't like the painting because of the quality. It was really, really bad. Like, paint was peeling. It just looked kind of gross. But he didn't want to offend Mother Conqueta. It was a generous gift, so he accepted it. And he raised some funds, and he had the painting restored to its former glory. While raising funds, Bartolo was subjected to verbal abuse. After all, the locals weren't practicing his faith, and he probably even opposed it. But Bartolo knew that God was by his side and would keep him safe as he completed what he was called to do. And so Bartolo began improvements on the church, constructing an impressive Marian shrine that today is one of the most popular Marian shrines in the world. During initial construction, Bartolo actually became sick and bedbound, but he used this time to write a novena. And this would be the first of many writings that he would complete. Construction began on May 8th, 1876, and basic construction was finished 4 years later, almost to the day, while the shrine wasn't totally finished and consecrated until 1887. By then, the congregation had grown significantly, almost too much for the church to handle. The congregation grew so quickly because people said they were witnessing numerous miracles, healings, special graces, and just such profound events that conversions were occurring at a near miraculous rate. And these miracles didn't stop. The Bishop of Nola encouraged Bartolo to build a larger church because of how many people were coming. And the church drew in large crowds even after Bartolo died, because in 1939, it was promoted to a basilica. And today, it is known as the Shrine of the Virgin of the Rosary of Pompeii. Bartolo made his home in Pompeii, and he and the Countess worked closely together on many activities and works for their faith. Because Bartolo was just a tertiary, and he hadn't taken any vows for marriage or ordination into priesthood, and because people began to make accusations against Bartolo's and Mariana's relationship, the two decided to just go ahead and get married. And I have a feeling that anybody who knew there wasn't anything funny going on saw it as kind of like one of those relationships where everybody was thinking it's like, yeah, they're a couple, but it just wasn't actually official. But they decided it just made the most sense to get married, make it official, put all those accusations to bed, and be done with it. But that's just my theory on it. Bartolo and Mariana got married April 7th, 1885, but it was the Josephite marriage. That is to say, they took a vow of chastity with each other. They continued to coordinate the funding and founding of schools, homes for orphans, homes for the children of prisoners, which was actually extremely radical at the time, and more. This attracted the criticism of many, and even some of Bartolo's peers criticized him, but he knew it was the right thing to do, and he didn't hesitate to continue his work. In 1902, Bartolo was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts in creating a petition for world peace from 1896 to 1900. He collected over 4 million signatures from dozens of countries. 8 members of the Italian Senate and Chamber of Deputies, as well as Pietro Cimienti and Antonio Cardarelli, nominated Bartolo. In 1903, he was again nominated by Luigi Simeoni and Vincenzo Giuseppe de Prisco for similar efforts. Pope Leo XIII even voiced his own approval for Bartolo to be nominated for the award. However, because his efforts had foundations in his faith, they weren't really considered by the committee, which, I guess makes sense. They don't want to seem like they're favoring one religion over another. But I think if someone does something for the good of the world, it shouldn't matter what their religion is. If people are benefiting because of their work, they should be recognized. Bartolo also wrote a couple of books. The first was titled The 15 Saturdays, and it was extremely popular among Christians, more successful than Bartolo ever imagined. And then he went on to write The History, Marvels, and Novena of the Most Holy Virgin of the Rosary of Pompeii. And this was even more popular than his first book. He then started writing for a magazine, something to keep people inspired and engaged in their faith regularly. In 1906, the two felt that the best course of action they could take was to donate their entire estate of the Shrine of Our Lady of Pompeii to the Holy See. It was just growing too much for them to be able to oversee, and at the same time, Bartolo relinquished all authority over his works. But he continued to help at the shrine and to promote the power of praying the rosary until his dying day, October 5th, 1926. His body is in a glass reliquary adorned in the suit of a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, which is a papal order of knighthood, which he was welcomed into in 1901. The piazza where the basilica today stands was renamed in honor of Bartolo Longo. The works that Bartolo had written were examined by a group of theologians determined authentic, and that they contained information that he could only obtain through visions from God. And his cause for beatification and canonization began February 28th, 1947. On October 26th, 1980, he was beatified by Pope John Paul II, and he called him the Apostle of the Rosary. on February 25th of this year, 2025, his canonization was approved. He was officially canonized October 19th, 2025. His feast day is October 5th. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there have been numerous miracles at the shrine Bartolo founded. One of these was the healing of Fortuna Agrelli, a young girl who was diagnosed with 3 incurable sicknesses. In 1883, people began to pray at Bartolo's shrine to Mary and to recite novenas. Mary appeared to Fortuna one night and told her to recite 3 novenas as well. Fortuna did as Mary instructed, and by the time she completed the novenas, she was cured. Mary appeared again and told her that anyone seeking healing from her just needed to pray 3 novenas of the Rosary in petition and 3 novenas in thanksgiving. Now, the details of the other healings are unfortunately less well retained. Yet again, all we have is the witness statements of the healings and little in terms of the descriptions of the healings. I found a few sporadic records, but they didn't really seem like trustworthy sources, so I didn't include them. But they were along a similar thing. Few children had incurable sicknesses, and they prayed at his shrine and were healed. Bartolo's conversion back to Catholicism is considered a miracle in and of itself. He fell about as far as possible into the darkness, embracing Satan and declaring him the true being to follow. But through devoted people around him and his own devotion to find salvation, he prayed for saving. He then rose to become a prominent Catholic tertiary, a truly devoted person to his faith, wholly knowing this was the only path to true salvation. His writings also worked to help his cause, being so profound and so evident that Bartolo was solely focused on bringing God to others and trying to save everyone he could, even in the face of adversity, is just irrefutable evidence that Bartolo believes everything he said. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will do my best to answer them. So, what do you think of St. Bartolo Longo? How about his journey? From his upbringing to his descent into Satanism and his rise back into God's grace? I hope you found his story interesting, because it's a really incredible story. I look forward to learning about your thoughts on St. Bartolo. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, like, comment, share with your friends, or send me a suggestion on a saint to check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. Just search for the Sanctified Podcast, and I should have a few episodes uploaded. Take care, and have a wonderful day.